big things are going to happen. And another thing that happens in the 90s is the development of supersymmetry, which again, I don't want to go into, but all the forces freeze up into one force. You can use one theory to explain all the forces, and it's symmetric and it's beautiful because that's important to us. That's in the 90s. The public is when it's the 90s when it starts getting serious. The public, again, not like your general public, but like people who are interested in following physics are like, this is it. We're living in a revolution. Like the next Einstein is here. Who's it going to be? And this is when you start getting celebrity string theorists. People like from that group of professors who was hired in the late 80s, you know, like I don't like your Brian Greens and all those people who they're writing books, they're becoming celebrities, and they're writing their hyperspace books and their elegant universes. I don't know when that one came out. I read them all. I don't know if you can tell, but I was the public. I was the public in the 90s. I was reading all these books and I was like, string theory is it, babes. So you get, I don't want that. You get these celebrity string theorists and they're writing their books and they're going on talk shows and they're going on talking tours and they're giving these big public talks and they're making lots and lots of money telling an enchanted public about how string theory is a revolution in physics, how string theory is going to change the world. The public needs to know about string theory. Just wait 10 years, babes. It's all coming. The big things are going to happen. We just need a decade to figure it out. It's going to happen. And in the 1990s, the other physicists are like, all right, you said a decade. It's been a decade. What's going on? What's going on? And this is when the physicists, the experimental physicists, realized that string theory is not testable, right? Like, you have all these dimensions. Like, we can't actually observe all these dimensions. Like, how could we ever test this theory? In fact, is it a theory? Is it a theory if you can't test it? Is it a theory at all if it is experimentally unverifiable? And this is when it kind of, the physics community is kind of like, well, okay, like, do your strings, but like, this isn't the hot new thing. Like, by the 90s, it's no longer like we need a string theorist to headline our physics conference. They're not hiring string theorists anymore. Every department's like, well, we have one. Surely we don't need more string theorists. And it's kind of like, okay, you said a decade. We don't see anything. But one thing the particle physicists do is they look at this idea of supersymmetry and they're like, ooh, what if we had this but in particle physics? What if we had a supersymmetric extension of the standard model, you know? And should I do it? I'm not going to do it for that. So particle physicists, without the string theorists, develop a supersymmetric version of the standard model, and because they're particle physicists, and the standard model is a very successful theory of physics, they immediately develop an experiment to test this idea that they have, and they start getting funding for it, and they will test it in the next decade. That is, of course, in opposition to the string theorists who have not yet proposed experiment. And I'm sure you can find them proposing experiment, but the issue with the multi-dimensions is that if you don't get your expected results, you do have an answer, which is, oh, we just couldn't observe it this time. Like, it wasn't in a dimension we can observe. And like, that can't be your working model of physics. That just can't be. So that was the 90s. We can move to the 2000s. The string theorists, what do you know? They're like, we're a decade away from something amazing. And this is about when the multiverse idea starts getting very popular. Like, not only are there multiple dimensions, but there are multi-universes that, again, we cannot observe. And the string theorists, of course, they write their books and they get their money and they talk about the multiverses because, of course, people are interested in this idea. That's an exciting idea. Even if it doesn't have any physics backing or experimental verification, even possible, that is something that someone who's just a casual viewer of physics would be interested in learning about. So they write their books and they get their cash. What else? It's the 2000s. Oh, I have another book. Should I pause? This book. The Einstein year happened in 1905, 2005. They did like a big 100th anniversary. This is Einstein's book that he republished a bunch of times, but this is like the last, like 1940 something version. And because they're republishing it for the big Einstein year, they ask a big famous physicist, Brian Greene, to write the introduction, and I'll just read to you what he says. And remember, this is the year 2005, so he probably wrote this in 2004. But he talks about relativity and how it's a huge deal and how it was such a big thing with physics, and it was a revolution in physics. Oh my goodness, all the things that came from it. And Brian Greene says, again in 2005, he says, now this change from point particles to strings that are so small that they look like points might not sound like it would accomplish much, but it does. Superstring theory successfully merges general relativity and quantum mechanics. Now, does it? Does it, Brian Greene? Have you successfully? Because like, I actually think I would have heard about a giant test where you successfully merged quantum mechanics and general relativity, but you haven't, and you didn't. You lied. There's the George Costanza thing where it's like, oh, it's not a lie if you believe it, right? But did Brian Greene actually believe 20 years, 30 years into an untestable theory that string theory was going to come out on top? Did he think he wrote that like it was a fact? He wrote that like it was a true statement that all physicists would agree with, and I don't think so. We'll talk. I don't think so. Leonard Susskind in 2008 is like, the LHC is going to confirm supersymmetry. So the Large Hadron Collider, that's one of those experiments that the particle physicists had developed to test their supersymmetric extension of the standard model. Remember, of course, that is not a string theory. That is an idea that was taken from string theory and applied to the standard model. So it is not a string theory. It is a particle physics standard model theory. But Leonard Susskind, string theorist, is like, it's coming up gravy, baby. The LHC is going to test it, and that will be experimental verification of string theory. But that's not true, because, spoiler alert, supersymmetry is dead in the water. But if it wasn't, if supersymmetry had been experimentally verified by the LHC, that would have been an extension of the standard model. It would have been experimental verification of that extension, and it would not have been anything to do with string theory besides that they got the idea from string theorists, right? But in the 2000s, they were kind of grasping for anything they could because the physicists had started really hampering on this idea of like, it's untestable, so is it even physics? If you go to the Wikipedia page for the history of string theory, it does in fact stop in 2003. So So yeah, something else that started happening in the 2000s with the string theorists is that they started getting publicly annoyed at kind of the lack of interest by the physics community, which is a thing that happens when you're a very famous physicist and you don't like the physics response to your stuff. You start complaining publicly. And the string theorists are like, we're like Galileo. No one is listening to us. They won't even look through the telescope. Big things are going to happen in a decade. The physicists won't listen. So the public, of course, in the 2000s, here's the string theorists, they're boys, saying this, and they're like, oh, it's Galileo all over again. The real physicists, the string theorists, are so brilliant, and it's like Einstein, and no one will listen to them. Oh my gosh, the physicists ignore the truth. The string theorists are going to produce something amazing in the next decade, and then they'll all see, I hate physicists, but I sure do love string theory. And they watch their books, they watch their documentaries on Nova by the string theorists about the multiverse, and they read their books, and they're like, real physicists are a problem. The string theorists will prove them. You'll all see. And this, I think, upsets the physicists, the other physicists, the not string theory physicists. They're just like, I'm working so hard. Like, imagine you are a Swiss gentleman and you discover the first planet around an M-class star and you win the Nobel Prize in the 2000s and you're like, yay, exoplanets, hooray, people finally care about exoplanets. I won the Nobel Prize, yay. And then you go to give your interview with the reporter, and the reporter's like, yeah, exoplanet's very cool. How do you feel about string theory? And you have to be like, how do I feel about what? Like, I haven't even heard a talk about string theory in a decade. Who's doing string theory? Why are you bringing up this esoteric, old, untestable theory to me all the time? I just want to talk about exoplanets. And the reporters, they're like, but we love string theory. What about the multiverse, huh? And the physicists start being like, no, I don't want to talk about that. What are you talking about? And they're annoyed. And in the 2000s, lots of books and stuff come out by other physicists who are like, string theory doesn't make any sense. You've been had. Stop listening to string theory. There's this thing, there's this quote from Wolfgang Pauli, who is a very famous physicist. He won the Nobel Prize. Ooh, do I even know? I don't even know what he won. It's something in quantum mechanics, spin or something. I'll look it up and put it on top. Ooh, am I gonna edit this? I don't know if I will. Haha, you'll never know what Wolfgang Pauli won the Nobel Prize for. Wolfgang Pauli was like a character. And he is famous for like this story where someone presents him with a physics theory that is very poorly written and like kind of hard to understand. And he replies with, it's not even wrong, like as an insult. Like, the theory is so nonsensical that you can't even begin to disprove it. It is an insult because it's like, you didn't even take the time to write a good theory. I don't even have the time to explain why it's wrong. It's not even wrong. It's not even a theory. And people start taking this quote and applying it to string theory because, is it a theory? Remember the three things? I said you have to have a mathematical explanation for the universe, like physical laws, which string theory has, but you also have to explain all past observations, which string theory can do because they do have the answers. Remember I said the results of your math can pop up in different dimensions, but if you know what answer you're looking for because you've already done the experiment, you can get that answer out of string theory. The part where string theory fails is that it doesn't make any suggestions for experiment. It doesn't have any experimental verification. It doesn't have like the way the standard model predicts particles. String theory has not made predictions like that. And if they have made predictions, they're not testable, which means they're not really predictions. So is string theory a theory? I mean, no, it's not. It's like a conjecture. It's like an idea for a theory. It's a mathematical tool, basically. And yeah, that's where we're at in the 2000s. It's kind of like the physicists are annoyed. They're annoyed that this keeps coming up. They're annoyed that their field is misrepresented in the media, and they're a little bit annoyed. And they're a little bit annoyed at the string theorists for allowing it to go this far. So we can move to the 2010s, and when you know it, the string theorists are like, we're a decade away from something amazing. You guys just wait. Now you have to realize, like, the number of string theorists has dwindled. The universities, I cannot imagine them ever hiring another string theorist because, like, it's just, if the field bears no fruit, it's not a great investment for your department to hire someone who's going to get tenure and be there for 55 years when they're doing something that doesn't have results. But you also see around this time is when the string theorists give their interviews, because they're still very famous and they're still like popular and people still like them, because of course these guys are great at explaining physics. They're great science communicators if I don't agree with their methods, and I think it's been a harm to science communication overall, but they're good at their jobs. They start saying things like, well, because by this point, by the 2010s, the public has heard the complaints from the other physicists and they realize that, this theory is not testable. And so the reporters know enough to know to be like, you keep talking about string theory, but the theory is not testable. What do you mean by that? And at this point, the string theorists start adding on to their interviews like, well, I never said it was correct. I never said string theory was the right theory. I have hope for it. And Ed Witten has his quotes about it being a 21st century idea that fell into the 20th century, but now we're a decade in. No, I said it wrong. Ed Witten has his quote about string theory being a 21st century idea that fell into the 20th century, except now we're 30 years later and we're in the 2010s, and what have you done for me lately, string theory? Here we are, where's the ideas? And that's when Ed Witten starts saying things like, I don't know if we'll ever understand it. It's beautiful, and I love it, but maybe we'll never understand it. Maybe we won't ever understand it. And at this point, I just have to say, like, how much, what is that called? Where you have, like, so much time invested that you can't say no. Like, you can't just turn it off. It's like when you've been in a terrible relationship for, like, 11 years, but you can't be like, I've wasted 11 years and just stay in it forever. Yeah. But just wait. In a decade, they're going to have the big results. Just wait. And 2010 is when the public turns on string theory. But they don't just turn on string theory. They turn on physics. This is the problem. This is the big problem.